hello, everybody. I'm very happy to welcome Nicola Fuchs-Schündeln from faraway Berlin today in our colloque. And I will briefly introduce her, even though, of course, especially since 2 years, really everyone, not only the economists in the room, know you. So in 2024, Nicola Fuchs-Schündeln became the new president of the Wissenschaftszentrum Berlin, the Science Center Berlin. And she's also a professor for macroeconomics at the University of Frankfurt. And I think before that, you were a professor assistant professor in economics at Yale University.
No, at Harvard.
At Harvard.
I did my PhD.
You did your PhD in here. I should look at my notes.
No, it is good.
Yeah, and you did your diploma in economics in Cologne. Yeah, Nicola's work was really awarded with many prizes. If I list them all, the lecture will be over. So I only list the three the ones I found most impressive. So you received 2 ERC grants, which is quite impressive. You also were awarded the Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz Prize of the DFG. And you are a member of the Leopoldina, the National Academy of Science, and you also got an award 2 years or 1 year ago from the Leopoldina. Not only you are a member of the Leopoldina, but you also got an award, I think the Karus Medal or something like that. Yeah, so that you are also involved in advising activities. You're a member of the advisory board of the Ministry for Economic Affairs and Climate issues, and of the Research Council of the Federal Reserve Bank. You still do research, which I find really most impressive, especially that you are giving really a research talk today, despite being president of this huge institution. So you worked on AI adoption, on the effect of school closures during the pandemic, on household saving behaviors and the hours worked, on East-West differences and the legacies of communism, and also on gender inequality, and I think this is what you are talking about today. I think you looked into gender inequality in ERC grant procedures, and it's always risky if you list the most prestigious journals from different disciplines. So I won't do that, but your work appeared and I think those two are safe. They sound very important: American Economic Review and American Economic Journal and the European Economic Journal, and I think also in Science. And if I forgot some, I think we can also add that. Okay, so thanks for coming the long way to Constance, Nicola, and we look really forward to your talk.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Claudia. Thanks. Thanks for the kind introduction. I'm very happy to be here. It's very hard to admit it's my first time in Constance, and so I'm glad that I finally made it. I don't see my slides here. Can I see my slides here? Or if not, it's fine. I'll stand here and I'll look around. Exactly. So I'm talking today about homophily in grant evaluations, and especially we are going to look at ERC grants, and this is joint work with Felix Holub, who is a postdoc at the WZB, just like Florian von Muschwitz, who is also here. So glad to see you here. So why do we study grant evaluations and grant evaluation processes? So grants are certainly important because they shape scientific careers, they shape scientific progress, and they deal with public funds. So we want the public funding agencies to give grants to the most promising projects. At the same time, especially those of you who've been involved in grant evaluations, you know that grant evaluations are very difficult, even more difficult than paper evaluations when you get a paper to referee, because you really have to judge grants on the future potential. So the information is more limited than when you see a final paper. And we all know that even small inefficiencies can matter, especially in highly competitive and prestigious programs. And in this grant evaluation process, there is this uncertainty that gives room to different biases and subjective judgment. And what we are especially interested in our study is whether the match between an applicant and reviewer affects the scores and ultimately the funding chances of an applicant. So the question that we are specifically asking is, does homophily based on shared gender, citizenship, or country of work influence grant evaluations? So as a female applicant, do I get better grants if I'm matched with a female reviewer? As a German applicant, does it help to be matched with a German reviewer? And as someone working in Germany, does it help to be matched with another person working in Germany? That is the question that we are asking. And the setting that we are looking at is the European Research Council. So we got access to the full universe of the European Research Council proposals from 2019 to 2023. So we have 5 years of proposals, and I will give you all the details on the data and how the review is done at the European Research Council. So for each proposals, we have the individual reviewer scores, and we can look at those individual reviewer scores, including proposal fixed effects and reviewer fixed effects. And that allows us to control for the quality of the proposal and also for the leniency of the reviewer. And again, I will come back to that later on and explain it in more detail. But when we look at the reviewer scores, we can really make causal statements about whether being matched with a reviewer who shares the own characteristics is beneficial or not. And then we will also look at the final panel decisions, which matter for the ultimate funding decisions. Here, what we will show is more correlational and less causal. So I will be very clear about that. And as a main finding, for those of you who have to leave earlier, we do find that same gender reviewers give slightly higher scores. So there is homophily by gender, but it's relatively small. And to our big surprise, what we found, what it matters much more is whether the applicant matches the country of work or the citizenship with a reviewer. So we have relatively much larger effects on individual scores on these two characteristics, citizenship and country of work. And we also find that the panel composition matters. So if the panel is more closer to the applicant in these characteristics, then the success chances are also better. So again, these are correlational results, less causal than when we look at the reviewers. So the existing literature is, there is quite a bit of literature that looks at grant evaluation processes, mostly in different national settings. But most of these literature does find some sort of homophily. Most of them look at either gender or at race, but they are all descriptive and correlational, except for one study, a very early study that we found by Broda from 1993, who looks at NSF grants in the fields of economics and gender, and also, like we do, has some fixed effects and actually finds not that it's beneficial to be matched with the same gender, but with the other gender back then in the field of economics. We have more causal evidence from other academic settings where they usually exploit random allocation. So Vargas and Yeva, they look at settings often in Spain or Italy where for academic promotion you have to have an exam in front of a panel, and this is total random allocation. And then you have randomness in this, which we don't have in the grant evaluation process to the extent. So what we are doing, what has not been done in the literature yet, is we show causal evidence of this homophily. We find citizenship and country of work as important group dimensions that haven't been studied before. And we also dig a little bit into what is behind that. And we have some suggestive evidence that I will show you, that it's not shared tastes by nationality or informational advantages by nationality that matter, so that it must be something else. Then let me give you a quick overview of the ERC and how the ERC works. And for those of you who are planning to apply to the ERC, some of these rules changed last year, so not everything I'm telling you will be true anymore. So look at their webpage if you're interested in doing this. But the basic principle has stayed the same. So the ERC is the most important European funding agency and funds explicitly high-risk, high-reward research across all scientific fields. So we have all scientific fields in our study. The sole criterion is scientific excellence, nothing else, not impact or transfer or so. In 2024 alone, it awarded over 2.1 billion euros to over 1,000 projects. And just to show that it is important, we looked up how often the ERC is acknowledged in Nature and in science articles, and that's around 15% of the time. So it is really an important funding agency. It's open to all EU members and also to selected associate countries, so UK, Switzerland, and Israel and also Norway also participate. Then there are three different schemes in the ERC that depend on how far along after the PhD the applicant is. So there are starting grants which are for 2 to 7 years after the PhD, then consolidator grants 7 to 12 years, and then advanced grants for more senior researchers. So this is what changed actually. So now these years have been adjusted a bit. Grants can run for up to 5 years, and the starting grants can go up to 1.5 million, consolidator grants up to 2 million, advanced grants up to 2.5 million. Other than that, they are in the evaluation process. They all follow the same process. And how does the evaluation process work? So when you plan to submit an ERC proposal, you submit it as you first decide which scheme is relevant for you, and then you submit it to a specific panel which belongs to 3 domains. So there are 3 different domains: social sciences and humanities, physical sciences and engineering, and life sciences, and within each domain there are 9 panels, right? So economists, for example, usually apply to SH1, the first panel in SH, and political science and sociologists usually to SH2 or SH3, which are other social science panels, right? And then there is a separate panel for each scheme. So all in all, we have 81 panels per year, 3 per scheme, and 3. We have 3 domains and 9 per domains. Right? And each of these panels is composed of 15 experts and is led by a chair. And these are the individuals we are looking at when we analyze the reviewers. Right? These are the panel members and also the panel chair. Any questions? You interrupt me. So then how does the process work? So first, after the applicant submits a proposal, there is a 2-step process. There's step 1, and only the best projects advance to step 2. Right? So in step 1, each of the proposals is individually rated by, on average, 4 panel members. So each proposal is sent out to 4 panel members, and the proposal is both a project description and a PI CV, basically. And the panel members give a grade on both of them independently. So they grade the proposal and they grade the PI on a scale of 1 to 5 with 0.5 stats. So 5 is the best and 1 is the worst. Then the panel comes together. They get all these individual reviews. On average, they have 4 reviews per proposal. And they discuss all the proposals. And then they decide jointly which proposals should advance to step 2. Those get an A. And which are rejected, those get a B or C. B or C only matters for reapplication next year, whether you're allowed to reapplicate or not. We are only looking at the decision whether you get an A or not. And then for those proposals who advance to step 2, the same procedure is repeated. Again, panel members individually rate both the project and the PI, but now they get a longer version of the project. So in terms of the projects, the applicant has to submit a 15-page version, which becomes available in step 2, and a 5-page version, which is the shorter one, which is seen in step 1. Right. So the panel members, again, rate the project and the PI, and now also external referees are asked to rate the project, and those are specifically picked for the individual projects. So they are on average closer to the project. Right. And then the panel meets again, has all these scores, and conducts now 30-minute interviews with applicants. And after that, the panel discusses everything and recommends either proposals for funding, then they get an A, or for rejection, then they get a B. And the funding, the proposals that are recommended for funding, they also get ranked, because it might be that there is not enough money to fund all of them. Right? So in the second step, what we have as a relevant outcome is first whether the proposal gets an A, but then second also whether it gets ultimately funded, right? So which means a good enough A, basically. We will look at both of these outcomes.
So Nicola, in the first step, an A is sufficient, right?
Yeah, and then you advance to step 2.
Automatically, right? There's no further rationing.
No. They do, I think, I was twice on the panel as well. There is some, you kind of understand that you want roughly twice as many in the second round as you think you can fund, but there is no explicit rationing there. it's costly because you have to review them again and you have to find all the external referees. In that sense, you don't want to overdo it. Exactly. So this is the procedure, and here is the data that we have. So we got, thankfully, from the ERC access to the ratings for the universe of the 37,000 proposals that were submitted in the 5 years from 2019 to 2023. And for both the applicants and all the panelists, we know the gender, we know the country of work, and we know the citizenship. And for the applicant, country of work is the host country of work. So if you, for example, submit a grant, but you want to move to Italy, and you know that for sure, then it will be officially submitted by the Italian university, and the host country of work would be Italy and not Germany. This is mostly relevant because there are people from the US who are also applying. They say, if I get it, I'm going to move to the UK, for example. So we do have for all of these proposals, both the project score and the PI score, both in step 2 and in step 1 and in step 2 if they make it to step 2. And on average, there are 4.2 reviews per proposal in step 1 and 4 in step 2. And each of the panelists on average reviews 20 proposals, 20.2 proposals in step 1 and 8 proposals in step 2. Right? So there is plenty of scope to control for proposal quality and also for reviewer leniency. And then for the panel decision, we look at as first the assignment of getting an A in step 1 and also in step 2, and then ultimately of the funding decision in step 2. So one thing we don't analyze here, we looked into it a bit, but I won't show you any results on this here, are the remote referees and their grading. And there are 2 reasons for that. First, the scale on which the remote referees grade was changed during our observation period, so that makes it difficult to compare. And then mostly, for most of the remote referees, we have exactly 1 review on 1 proposal, so we cannot include review of fixed effects, right? In contrast to the panel members. So for the official analysis, we left them out. We looked into it, and it without the fixed effects, it looks that we find very similar biases that we also find for the panel members.
But it could be interesting to look at the interaction between how well a proposal is evaluated by a remote referee and the internal referee process, whether that would change the final evaluation. So if I gave it sort of a not so great score, but then the remote referee gives it a great score, so maybe you could use it sort of as a backdoor.
I think, with this kind of data, you can do all these kind of analysis, which are interesting, but are not core to our question. So we haven't done it, and we are not allowed to do it because we are only allowed to use the data for our question. But I think, it is interesting to see what is the weight in the final deliberation of the remote referees versus the panel members, right? Clearly, the remote referees, they are closer to the subject, so they are more experts, but then they don't have the comparison, right? So there's this trade-off there. But we haven't looked at. But on average, and in the second round, each proposal has a further 4 referees, reports from remote referees. So here are summary statistics, and then I will also show you summary statistics on the gender composition, country of work, and citizenship. So these are the raw numbers of what we have. So in step 1, so here are 37,000 proposals. On average, each of them gets graded by 4 reviewers. That's why we have 155,000 observations. The average project score is 3.2. The average PI score is 3.5. And on average, 32% of them advance to the second step. And I want to point out that the standard deviation here is relatively high. It's around 1 on both PI score and project score. So then, 32% of these 37,000 advance to step 2. These are the 11,000. And then again, on average, we have roughly 4 reviews, so that we have 47,000 observations in the second step. And as you would hope, the average scores are higher in the second step on both the project and the PI. And the standard deviation is also a little bit smaller. And then on average in the second step, 63 of the proposals are assigned an A. So the panel says these are proposals that should in principle be funded, but there are not enough funds for all of them. So on average, 44% are in the end funded. Right? Okay. All right. So here you see the gender distribution, both of the applicants and of the reviewers. So here, so you have the 3 domains: physical sciences and engineering, life sciences and social sciences and humanities, and then within each domain the 3 schemes: advanced, consolidator, and starting. And here is a share of male, and the dark color are the applicants, and the lighter color are the reviewers. Right? And there are different interesting things. So if you look at both applicants and reviewers, you see the male share is highest in physical sciences and engineering. So there it's on average 70 to 80% are men. In the life sciences, it's around 60%. In the social sciences, we are closer to 50%. And you also see that among the applicants, the male share is highest in advanced grants and lowest in starting grants. So this is part of first the cohort effect and the leaky pipeline that you have, and that we also see in all 3 domains. And what you see is that the ERC really makes an effort to get more gender balanced panels. So on average, the share of male is smaller among the reviewers than among the applicants. And especially within one domain, the ERC makes sure that the females are equally distributed between starting, consolidator, and advanced grants. So I thought this really shows that the ERC, which also has a gender working group, and it really cares about these issues. So they really make an effort to have female women among the reviewers. Right? But apparently it's still hard to find enough in the physical sciences and engineering. This is a gender distribution. Now the country of work distribution, and I will also show the citizenship distribution, which looks similar. So here you have the country of work among the applicants, and then among the reviewers. So some countries, so among the applicants, these have to be then now countries, participating countries, so European countries. Among the reviewers, there can also be others. But the only thing I want you to get away from that is that clearly the largest countries have the largest share here, right? So you have France, Germany, Italy, Netherlands, Spain, and UK. So the largest countries and those with a well-established scientific system, they both have a higher share of applicants and a higher share of reviewers. And here you see the citizenship distribution. And again, you have here France, Germany, Italy, Spain. So the larger countries are more represented. And I want to stress that here, because in the end I will do some back of the envelope calculation, but what you already see here is that this means that when you are an applicant from a large country, you have a much higher chance to be matched with a reviewer from your country. Right? So if you're an applicant from Estonia, the probability that there is another Estonian on your panel is basically 0, right? While if you are an applicant from Germany, it's almost sure that there will be a German in your panel. So being matched with someone from your country is more likely for the big countries. And since we find an effect there, that means coming from a big country gives you some advantage, actually. Okay, so this is the setup. And now what are we doing? So whenever you ask whether there is an advantage in being matched with someone from who's sharing your characteristics, obviously here the big challenge is that the allocation of proposals to reviewers is not random. So the panel chair does this allocation. I think what the panel chairs really have in mind is to find the reviewers among the panel who are closest to the proposal in terms of the content, but obviously this leaves room for a lot of biases. So specifically, it might be the case that high quality proposals are more likely to be assigned to an in-group reviewer. So you might think if you see a high quality proposal from a female applicant, for example, maybe the chair is inclined to give it to a female reviewer. And then if you see a gender effect there, it's because really the female applications that end up with female reviewers are of better quality. Right? And then obviously different reviewers are also differently lenient. So some give on average better grades, some are harsher. And I don't have a good story for that, but it could be that lenient reviewers are more likely to be assigned to in-group applicants. So the real challenge is that you want to control for proposal quality, which we obviously cannot observe, we don't know how good a proposal is, and the leniency of the reviewer. But the way we do that is by including a fixed effects for every proposal and every reviewer, and this is possible because we have for each proposal at least 4 reviews, and also every reviewer reviews 8 to 20 proposals. So basically what we are asking is how is the same proposal evaluated by reviewers of the same versus other groups, and how does the same reviewer evaluate proposals of the same versus other groups. So econometrically here that is done this way, and I already explained it in words. So our outcome variable is usually then the score on either the project or on the PI. That is given to proposal I by reviewer J, and then we have proposal fixed effects that control for the quality of the proposal, and we have reviewer fixed effects that control for the leniency of the reviewer. And then here this is an indicator variable whether the applicant and the reviewer share certain characteristics, either gender or country of work or citizenship, and delta is our variable of interest, our coefficient of interest. So do you get an advantage of being matched with a reviewer who shares your characteristics? That's what we're asking. Yeah.
So, I mean, the only thing you can capture if there's a reviewer who's only lenient towards his own nationality, right? So clearly biased.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we are
No, but if he's only, so what's this, I don't want to blame any nationality. I'm German. Let's say there's a German who only gives good grades to the Germans, but then it's bad to everybody else, right? Then he gets a...
No, then he would, if he's generally a strict reviewer, he would have a low reviewer fixed effects, because on average he gives low grades. But then whenever he's matched with a German applicant, he would give a higher grade. So you would get a positive delta. That's exactly what we are measuring, right? So it's exactly this question. So do you give better grades to someone who shares your characteristics, independent of whether you are lenient reviewer on average or a very strict reviewer, and also independent of whether this proposal that you have is a very good proposal or a very bad proposal. Yeah. Okay. Then I get to the result. I show them in graphs. I also have the tables if you're interested in specific numbers. And I start with the gender results, and then I come to the citizenship and country of work results. And first here I show you always the results on these individual reviews, and then later on we will look at the panel decisions where we run a similar but not the same regression. Right? So now you will see a lot of different lines here. So step 1 are the circles, and the diamonds are for step 2. And in blue are the project score, and in red is the PI score. So the PI really scores the CV of the PI, basically. How promising is this PI? How has he or she performed so far? Right? And here is the coefficient that we find on the same gender. So on this, so now the indicator variable is whether the reviewer shares the gender of the applicant. Right? And we do find positive numbers here, and we also find that they are statistically significant. So these are 95% confidence bands. So same gender reviewers award slightly higher scores, but quantitatively the effects are small. Right? So on average, the scores are 0.024 points higher on the scale from 1 to 5 if you are matched with a reviewer of the same gender. Right? And just remember the standard deviation was basically 1 in step 1. It's 0.7 roughly in step 2. So these effects are statistically significant, but they are small. They are 2 to 5% of a standard deviation. So these are the results for gender. And now I show you the results for country and citizenship. And we have exactly the same scale. So that's why it was so much to the left here. And now you see even more results because we split up 3 situations. So you could have the situation that applicant and reviewer come from a different country but have the same citizenship. So there are two Germans, but one of them works in France and one in Germany. They could they could work in the same country but have different citizenship. So you're comparing a Brit to a France, both working in French, both working in Germany. Or you could have a match in both country and citizenship. Yeah, so you're comparing a German working in Constance and being matched with a German working in Berlin. Right? And what you see is right away that now the coefficients, they are all statistically significant and they are substantially larger than in the gender bias. And also you see that they are largest when applicant and reviewer share both country and citizenship. And now they are also economically important, I would say. So here, for example, you have effects that are at 10 to 20% of a standard deviation. Right? So here it does seem also to economically matter, or economically, I mean, in substantive terms, matter whether you are matched with a reviewer who shares country of work or citizenship. Okay. So now we looked a little bit more into that. So why is that? Why do people give better scores when they evaluate an applicant from the same country and citizenship? And one thing you might think maybe that is not biased, but it's a shared taste. So for example, in economics, I mean, many Italians work on political economy. Germans used to work in microtheory. And then if you are more favorable towards an application that comes from your subfield, then that could be captured by this match in citizenship. And I also think of the natural sciences, you have big machines maybe, so you have even more split up what people are working on. So we wanted to understand, is it really nationality and country of work, or does it have to do something with topical fit, which correlates with nationality? And then we included 3 different proxies for this topical fit. So the first is academic closeness. So here we used a Spectre 2, which is a tool that matches or that generates a number, a vector basically for academic closeness between different texts. And we put into it on the one side the abstract from the proposal, and on the one side the abstract from the reviewer's 20 most cited papers. Right? And that then spits out a number that tells you how close the applicant is to the reviewer. We also controlled for co-author network, so we controlled whether applicant and reviewer are a co-author, or have been co-authors, or share a co-author first in the last 5 years or in 5 to 10 years. So in principle, they shouldn't be co-authors. So that should actually be ruled out. We still have a few of these cases. I have to admit, we didn't look in detail. I mean, we looked into 1 or 2, and it seemed to be on these papers that have 100 co-authors, right? Which you have sometimes in the natural sciences. And then I guess that can get lost. You don't even know your co-authors anymore. So I want to take a benign view here, but it does happen. So it shouldn't. And then also when the applicant submits, he or she should indicate a keyword, and there is a list of keywords that the ERC offers, and the reviewers, the applicant does that, and that should help in the allocation to reviewers. And what we then can control for is whether the applicant keyword matches with the reviewer's model keyword in that call year. Right, so we asked, so what are the average proposals that the reviewer looks at? What is all of those proposals? What is the keyword that is most often mentioned? And then this variable is equal to 1 if that matches a keyword that the applicant put in. And we control for all of these 3 measures of closeness, and our same country and same citizenship coefficients remain basically really completely the same. So they don't do anything to it. On average, you get positive coefficients on these, right? So you do get better grades if you have a more academic closeness between reviewer and applicant.
Directly on this, super interesting, of course. For the first point, can you recall roughly in terms of the magnitude? So you said that for gender, for instance, the effects were smaller compared to the country patterns. My intuition about the academic closeness would have been that it competes or crowds out the other stuff, so that's not the case. But in terms of the magnitude,
in terms of the magnitude,
what it is, like, because these epistemic and other things are so for me, thinking of homophily, I can't even pronounce it properly, so that would be something that would also sort of make sense, right? So maybe as a control, it doesn't do anything, but maybe in terms of magnitude, it dwarfs maybe some of the things.
Yeah, let me look at it. I mean, I have to say that I didn't look into it, but I should have it here. So here, for example, so here you have the results, the coefficients on our 3 variables of interest, and then whether reviewer and applicant share the same topic, because that is also a 0-1 variable. So I think it's easier to compare, and you see it is actually smaller in terms of magnitude than the other ones. And it's insignificant in step 1, but it becomes significant in step 2. But I think those, because they are all indicator variables, I think you can compare in terms of magnitude. So actually, yeah, it's an interesting point. But sharing a citizenship or a country of work is more important than working on the same topic. Yeah.
I mean, this is because the topics are assigned. I mean, there's not much variation then within the 4 reviewers for topics, right? So the macro guys, they review the macro.
Yeah, I have to say, I don't know how much in detail they go. I haven't looked at it. And we also have it for the other, but the other, here's, for example, whether you share a co-author or not. You also see positive coefficients. Here you have the co-author coefficients. Yeah, they are more in the same ballpark, maybe some of them even larger than the other ones, yeah. But we haven't looked at it systematically. I have to say it's the first time I look at it in this way. Yeah. So the variables, so it doesn't matter, but it doesn't do anything on our country or citizenship results, which tells us there's something else that is going on here than working on the same topic. Another thing you might think could be going on is that reviewers have an informational advantage if the applicant comes from the same country of work or has the same citizenship. So I think they are more likely to know the applicant, and then maybe that gives them a better judgment of the proposal, or maybe also, yeah, the style of writing is more similar or things like that. If that were the case, though, if a reviewer has an informational advantage if the applicant comes from the same country, then that could be in favor of the applicant, but also could play out against the applicant, right? So I might also know this person is really not capable, so I give a very low grade, right? So informational advantage, what it should do is that reviewers are more likely to give extreme grades, both good grades and bad grades, and less grades in the middle, right? If you are a bit unsure, you are more likely to give a grade in the middle, and that's not what we find. So there's absolutely no evidence of harsher scoring at the lower tail. So it's all at the upper tail. So that makes it, so I can show you this. So if you have lots of these figures, but here is actually here's the probability that a proposal gets exactly a 1 or exactly 1.5 or so on. And these are our 3 coefficients of interest. And what you would expect in an informational advantage is the U shape here. But you see it's already negative at low grades, and all the mass goes to the upper tail, right? So, so it's really an advantage to be matched with someone from the same country of work or citizenship. Right? So overall, this really seems to be a bit of a bias towards your own group when it comes to country of work and citizenship. What generates this bias? There could be different things, right? It could be a love for sharing your characteristics. It could also be, in this setting, maybe strategic. So that as a German reviewer, I think it's good if Germany gets a lot of ESC grants, because that advances the standing of science in the federal government, and that will give more funding to science in Germany. It could be something like that as well, right? So we couldn't dig any deeper than that. But I think we at least have some evidence that it's not information, it's also not shared scientific taste. So there seems to be something else going on. So the question is, do reviewers become more strategic? If it's strategy, then they should become more strategic over time. It's a good point. We haven't looked at it because we know whether it's your first, second, or third one on the panel. Yeah.
When we look at different differences across countries, so.
Yes. we don't generally show them. I mean, you can. I mean, for the big countries, you can do it separately, and you do. Do you want to give a guess?
Places stereotypes.
We do find, I mean, it's,
Regions, for instance, like Southern Europe.
yeah, it's a little bit different, but there seems to be some indications that Italy and France have it more than some other big countries. But I don't think these differences are statistically significant, and we don't report them. Yeah. So further results, we didn't split up by country, but we looked across different schemes and domains, and these country and citizenship effects, they're very homogeneous. So they're for all domains and for all schemes, while the gender effects, they are largest in the life sciences and physical sciences and engineering. They are basically absent in the social sciences. So we can pat our shoulders exactly that we are doing better. I mean, they are small also there, but they are driven by the life sciences and physical sciences and engineering, where the female share is also lower. Right? That's where they show.
Isn't that a sign that the gender homophily effect is driven by men, because those are the disciplines with more male reviewers?
Ah, yeah. So indirectly, that's true probably, because they do have more male reviewers. Yeah. Good point. So there's some indication of that. Exactly. We also looked at institutions' rank, because we got this question a few times. Does it matter if a reviewer, an applicant from a good institution is matched with a reviewer of a good institution? So if someone from Bocconi is matched with LSE in economics or so, does that matter? It doesn't. So we don't find any evidence for that. Okay. So these are the reviewer results, and now we come to the panel decisions. So ultimately what matters for the applicant is the panel decisions, where the individual scores serve as an input, but then there is a collective discussion, right? And in step 2 you also have the external reviewers, and you have the interview with the applicant. So there's more information coming in. So do we see this kind of homophily in the panel decisions? As I already said, in step 1 we consider whether the panel gives an A or not. In step 2, we consider both giving an A and ultimately granting funding. Now here, each proposal only has one panel decision at each step, so we cannot control for proposal quality. So everything I'm showing you here is correlational. Right? So it's less causal than what I showed you before. So this is a regression we are running. It's very similar to the one before. Now, so the outcome is whether a proposal gets an A or ultimately funding. So I is the indicator for the proposal again. We have a fixed effect for the demographic of the applicant, so gender or country or so on. We have a panel scheme year fixed effect, so we compare different proposals in this group of 15 people who discuss all these proposals. And then delta is again our coefficient of interest, and this variable either says captures a share of panel members that match the applicant's demographic, or whether the panel chair matches the applicant's demographic. If I apply to a panel and there might be 30% women, then this is 0.3 for me, and if the share is German, it's 1, otherwise it's 0. Okay. And here are now the coefficients on this delta, and here is whether the proposal gets an A in step 1, whether the proposal gets an A in step 2, and whether the proposal ultimately gets funding. And first I show you again the gender results, and actually they are all statistically insignificant, and they actually go in the direction of saying that it's that a proposal from a female applicant is more likely to get funded if the male share is higher, right? But they're not statistically significant, and it's the same if I show you whether the chair matches the gender with the applicant. So no significant results for gender homophily, but that is different for country and citizenship homophily. So now the standard errors are quite wide, but what you will see is that generally these coefficients are positive with this exception. And also in step 1, being assigned an A, these are the circles on top, you always get a positive and significant coefficient. Right? So here is whether the share of different countries, same citizenship panel members, share of same country, different citizenship panel members, and here is both matches So both matches actually doesn't make a difference here, right? But there is this indication that being matched as an applicant with a panel that on average shares my characteristics gives me a higher chance to advance to step 2. Right? In step 2, the effects are smaller and they are not statistically significant. And these sizes are also, again, economically important. So if I have one additional same country, same citizenship panelist, for example, that gives me a 1.7 percentage point higher probability to advance to step 2. And the baseline probability was 32%, right? So that is significant. So there is something going on there. And here is the same for whether the chair matches the characteristic of the applicant. So we have the same scale, which doesn't really make sense. Occurred to me, but anyhow, we also see that step 1, the results are positive and significant. So also there's this evidence in step 1. It matters whether the chair shares my characteristics regarding country of work and citizenship for advancing to step 2. Again, it's correlational. It's not really causal. We cannot control for the quality of the proposal. But it's in line with the other results that we found before. And then just the back of the envelope calculation, how much does this matter? So here we calculate what is the ex ante funding probability, or how does the ex ante funding probability change, taking into account that the probability of advancing to step 2 is higher if you share country of work and citizenship with the reviewers, and then also the step 2 funding probabilities we take from the estimates that we had before. And here that what this table tells you is that if there is one additional panel member in the panel, for example, who shares both country and citizenship with me, my ex ante funding probability increases by 1 percentage point. And the ex ante funding probability is only 14%. So that's quite a large effect. And a different way to evaluate this effect is to compare how are the ex ante funding probabilities different than from applicants who come from big countries, who are much more likely to be shared with a panel that shares their characteristics, than applicants who come from small countries. Right? And here we show the average share of panel members. For example, if you come from a top 5 country, so one of the 5 largest countries, then, for example, the probability or the share of panel members that will share my country and citizenship as a German is on average 4.6%. If you are not from one of the top 5 countries, it's only 1.5%. Right? So there's a difference of 3 percentage points. And the same also with only sharing country of work or only sharing citizenship. And if you put that all together, that means that top 5 country applicants have on average a 0.9 percentage points higher probability of being funded than those who come from smaller countries.
A short question, but this 0.9 percentage points, that's basically based on this estimate of the average effect, right?
Yeah.
Because it could also be, that if you model the heterogeneity of that effect depending on country size, that actually it's the small countries that matter more. That's more anecdotal. So for instance, if you are Estonian, for instance, so if usually it's French and Germans and people sitting at the table, and suddenly there's this one Estonian guy and there's this one decent proposal from Estonia, and then this person says, this is great, we have to do that. So actually, because the average effect doesn't have that heterogeneity, it could be driven by the small country, or the people coming from the small countries. And so actually it could be the reverse problem, that the small countries are driving this, or the people from the
if everyone says, there is this Estonian, and we never have a proposal from Estonia, so we rather grant that, then it doesn't matter for the Estonian applicant, though, whether there are Germans on the panel or Estonians, right? So what you say it could be if the small countries kind of form a coalition, right? So if the Estonian says, I am supporting the Czech or the Portuguese or whatever smaller country you have, that we actually looked into, because the ERC asked us to look into it, because they have this set of, they call this widening countries, which are countries that are underrepresented in the ERC, and they do a lot of effort to get them more representative. And we looked very much into this widening countries and whether it matters, and also maybe they play together or so, and we didn't find anything. Right. Yeah.
Perhaps I missed it. Do you control here for the same match? Because, I mean, as a reviewer, in the first stage, you reviewed the same proposals that made it to the second round as well.
I mean, here, yeah, these estimates only take the final panel decisions into account. So we don't control for the reviews at all. So it's
yeah, but I mean, you would have this information because the same reviewer is appointed.
That's true. That's
same
true.
proposal.
Yeah. We would have that information. But here it's really only about the panel decision, not about the reviewers anymore. One thing we do find is we were thinking of that. Maybe it doesn't matter because we find a significant effect whether you advance to step 2 or not. And you could say, if this is a marginal proposal that makes it to step 2, then this proposal won't have a chance in step 2 anyhow. So in the end, it doesn't matter. But there is actually substantial reshuffling in step 2. So we looked at this. It's true that if you are, if you have the highest reviews in step 1, then the probability of ultimately receiving funding is higher than if you had the lowest reviews. But even among the bottom 20%, 25% of them later get funded. So the step 2 does matter. So this decision to get into step 2 also does matter. Okay, then let me conclude with a discussion. So this step 1 is really, it is a gatekeeping step, but it matters, as I just said, and these small evaluation differences will decide who reaches this more information-rich second stage, where there is still a substantial reshuffling of the proposal. And we do find evidence that this country of work and citizenship matter in this decision to get to step 2. Okay. Then, as I said, this match exposure is unevenly distributed across applicants, so it gives an advantage to applicants from larger countries. And but again, these panel outcomes, they are correlational. The other ones are causal, but these are correlational. So one might be cautious with policy conclusions, but as policy options, I think that the ERC could consider is first, restrictions on the review assignment, so just that you don't assign someone from the same country of work or citizenship to a proposal. Right? So the ERC obviously already does that with institutions. So if you apply from the University of Constance, your reviewer won't be from the University of Constance. If there is a reviewer on the panel, this person has to leave the room when your proposal gets discussed initially. Then afterwards, obviously, you have this comparative discussion of proposals. But this might indicate that you even want to avoid matches by citizenship and country of work, which I guess that could be implemented if the ERC wanted to do that. Then another thing one could do is to introduce some randomization for proposals near the cutoff. So I think the Volkswagen Stiftung does that for some programs, that you say we do this initial ranking, but then the 5 to 10 proposals who are just would make it to step 1 or not, you put them into a pot and do a lottery on them, so that in these where it becomes this decision to advance to step 2 becomes for this group random, and obviously that would avoid these kind of biases. And then the third thing that you could do is to blind the citizenship or country of work. That is right now not possible because you see the CV of the PI, and I think even if you, you cannot black out everything in the CV because then there's nothing left. And what you could do is you could separate the project and the PI. So you could say some reviewers review the PI and some the project, and then those who review the project, they wouldn't need to know from whom it comes, right? So there you could take out the name of the applicant. And here, in contrast to papers, it's harder to guess who the applicant is, right? I mean, in economics, we gave up this double-blind reviewing a long time ago because they say everyone knows the papers and you can look it up on the internet. But for proposals, it will not be that clear that I can guess easily who wrote it, even if I know the person, right? still not completely clear. But that would be something that could be done. And I think that would be an interesting policy exercise, actually. Okay. Right, and then so let me conclude. We find that same country and same citizenship, we will award higher scores to the same proposals. We also find the same gender effect, but it is smaller. And we would say that it's unlikely that these results are explained by shared tastes, topical proximity, or informational advantages. So there seems to be something else behind it. And the panel composition is associated with this step 1 advancement and higher ex ante funding probability. That's it. Thanks a lot.